Hello students and welcome back to yet another video of your economics lecture. Today we are going to cover up unit 2 part 1, and in this unit we're going to cover about utility, right? So let's understand this concept, and I hope you are watching videos and preparing notes and started studying, right? Okay, let's move ahead. I'll share my screen with you all now. Welcome you all to the online lectures of Dr. D.Y. Patil Center for Management and Research. The subject we're going to cover is economic analysis for business decisions. And today we're going to conduct Unit 2, Part 1, right? So it covers utility. So let's understand about this concept first, that what is utility, right? So utility is nothing but a power in a commodity to satisfy human wants. Now what is that? For example, a textbook has greater utility for a student, for you all, than to illiterate person. To that person, there is no use of a book, right? But you can read it, so you have the utility because it satisfies your want of a knowledge, right? So it depends upon the urgency of want, that what you want. It depends, utility depends upon that, right? We'll understand that with the help of a schedule. So this is a schedule in front of you. We are taking example of apple, right? So if you are consuming an apple, one apple you have consumed, we are measuring it, right? So your utility is 10, very high. You get very high utility. You get very high satisfaction by eating first apple. But when you eat second apple, your utility goes on reducing. Then third apple, it reduces. Fourth, fifth, sixth, it is 0. Now you're full, your stomach is full, you don't want to eat anymore. And when you eat another one, it is minus, it goes in negative. So utility goes in negative. So how do you measure a total utility? You go on adding 10, 10 plus 6, 16, right? 16 plus 4, 20, 20 plus 3, 23, 23 plus 1, 24, 24 plus 0, 24, and 24 minus 2, 22. That means the utility goes on diminishing, right? And then it becomes constant, and then it becomes negative. And what happens? Total utility is rising till 23, till the fourth unit. Then it becomes constant, and then it starts reducing. This is how you read a table. This is how you interpret a table, right? Let's understand now. Now you take this from your example. If you are using some commodity, you have utility when it's a first unit, and then it goes on reducing, right? So it all depends upon that. So it is the additional utility brought by a consumer after every addition in the quantity of commodity. That is the definition. Additional utility after having one more unit. It can be you're eating something, it can be about clothes, it can be about books, it can be about anything in the world, right? So this utility, what you have seen, is goes on diminishing right from the beginning. See, it goes on diminishing. See, 10, 6, 4, 3, it goes on diminishing with every additional consumption. And it's a difference between total utility. We added 10 plus 6, 16 plus 4. It is difference between total utility, 6, 4. You understand? If you go reverse. So this utility is 0 when total utility becomes constant. 24, 24. So MU is 0. So this is how, if you remember the table, you have to write it down the table. You observe it and write down what you observe. What you observe, MU goes on diminishing. MU is 0 when TU is constant. And as MU becomes negative, TU starts reducing, or when TU starts reducing, MU becomes negative, either or. So this is how you write it down. Just remember the figure 10, 6, 4, 3, 2, 10, 6, 4, 3, 1, 0, minus 2. Automatically, you can calculate utility and write down the interpretation of the table. Understand? Now, total utility is what? Again, it is sum total of utility got by a consumer at a particular level of consumption. Total of MU. So total, what you see, let's go at a table, and what you can see, total utility rises, right? 10, 16, 20, 23 after every addition in consumption in the beginning. But it rises at a diminishing rate. See difference. Then it was 6, difference was 6, then difference was 4, then difference was 3. It is rising but on a diminishing rate. So total utility is what? It's addition of mu, and total utility remains constant. It becomes constant after some point of time. So this is how you interpret and write it down about mu and tu. Understood? From this concept, a new concept comes in, that is a law of diminishing marginal utility. It's same that we have seen in the table, in the schedule. What was that? The additional satisfaction which a consumer gets. Relate, वो graph schedule याद करो. From every addition in the unit of a commodity comes down during consumption. It comes down during consumption. See? It comes down during consumption, 10, 6, 4, 3, 1. So that is nothing but law of diminishing marginal utility. Okay. Assumptions. There are assumptions of this law as any law of economics. Now, what are they? It's like they are reasonable quantity of commodity should be offered. मतलब one apple at a time. ऐसा नहीं पहले one apple दिया, फिर 2 दिया, फिर 3 दिया. No, the quantity should be constant. One apple it should increase. एप्पल शुड बी ऑफ अ सेम नेचर. एक खट्टा है, एक मीठा है, एक कड़वा है, एक कच्चा है. नहीं, इट शुड बी सेम. कंटिन्यूअस कंजम्पशन बैक टू बैक. एक एप्पल आज खाया, एक एप्पल कल खाया. नो, कंटिन्यूअस कंजम्पशन. द टेस्ट शुड बी कांस्टेंट. मतलब जब ऊपर बोला जा रहा है आइडेंटिकल यूनिट्स में साइज शुड बी कांस्टेंट. ऐसा नहीं कि पहला एप्पल तुम्हें छोटा सा दिया, दूसरा बड़ा दिया तो ऑफ कोर्स बढ़ जाएगी यूटिलिटी. नहीं, आइडेंटिकल शेप चाहिए, आइडेंटिकल टेस्ट चाहिए, कंटिन्यूअस कंजम्पशन चाहिए, क्वांटिटी सेम चाहिए, टेस्ट ऑफ कंज्यूमर भी कांस्टेंट, कंज्यूमर का टेस्ट भी कांस्टेंट चाहिए, तो उसके स्टेट ऑफ माइंड भी कांस्टेंट चाहिए, है ना. सो ऑल दीज assumptions are true, then only law of diminishing marginal utility is true. Okay, otherwise it fails. So this is about law of diminishing marginal utility. So we understood concepts like utility, marginal utility, total utility and law of diminishing marginal utility. अगर क्वेश्चन आया तो आपको ये सब ग्राफ, ये सब स्केड्यूल ड्रॉ करना है, समझाना है, स्टेटमेंट देना है डिमिनिशिंग मार्जिनल यूटिलिटी के लॉ का, assumption लिखना है, your answer is done. Understood? So this was the concept. Next is indifference curve. Now what is that? An indifference curve may be defined as the locus of points giving particular combination or bundle of goods which yield the same utility or level of satisfaction to the consumer so that he is indifferent as to particular combination he consumes. That is, a consumer is indifferent towards all the combinations lying in the same indifference curve. So what is that? An indifference curve is nothing but a graph that shows a combination of two goods that give a consumer equal satisfaction and utility, and thereby making the consumer indifferent. So indifference curves are heuristic devices used in contemporary macroeconomics to demonstrate consumer preference and the limitations of a budget, right? So recent economists have adopted the principles of indifference curve in the study of welfare economics. Let's understand. This is the indifference curve in front of you. There are two commodities X and Y, as you can see on the indifference curve, and there are different combinations A, B, C, D when a consumer consumes commodity X and commodity Y. So you find out utility received by the consumer for different commodities X and Y at different point of time. This is nothing but indifference curve. Now, as any law of economics, this too has assumptions. Let's understand them one by one. The very first assumption is more of a commodity is better than less. That is, it is assumed that the consumer will always prefer a larger amount of a good to a smaller amount of that good. Think about yourself, right? Provided that the other goods at his disposal remain unchanged. This is very reasonable assumption, implies that the consumer is not oversupplied with any good. He is not given oversupply of any good. So when the consumer is oversupplied, then what will happen? Or oversatiated with one good, he will prefer a smaller amount of that good to its larger amount. So it is thus assumed that the consumer has not yet reached the point of satiety in consumption of any good. So this assumption is therefore known as non-satiety assumption, right? So the more of a commodity is better than less, the very first one. Next assumption is preference or indifferences of a consumers are transitive. Means what? Like suppose there are three combinations of two goods, A, B, and C. So if a consumer is indifferent between A and B and also between B and C, then it is assumed that he will be indifferent between C too. So this implies that consumers' tastes are quite consistent. So this assumption is known as assumption of transitivity, right? The next assumption is diminishing marginal rate of substitution. Now, what is that? Let's go back to the indifference curve. You will understand. Then I understand. Like, look at the indifference curve. So, in indifference curve analysis, what happens? The principle of diminishing marginal rate of substitution is assumed. Now, in other words, it is assumed that as more of X are substituted for Y, the consumer will be willing to give up fewer and fewer units of Y for each additional unit of X. Understand? Or when more and more of Y is substituted for X, then he will be willing to give up fewer and fewer units of X for each additional unit of Y. Okay, listen carefully. So this rule about consumers' behavior is described as a principle of diminishing marginal rate of substitution. Now, this principle follows as a matter of logical necessity from the assumption that particular bonds are satiable and that various goods are not perfect substitutes for one another. Understood? So it's all upon that. So indifference curves operates under many assumptions, right? Like we have seen. For example, each indifference curve is convex to the origin and no indifference curves ever intersect. So consumers are always assumed uh, uh, to be satisfied when achieving bundles of goods on higher indifference curves. So if a consumer's income increases, the curve will move higher up on a graph because the consumer now can afford more of each type of goods, right? So many core principles of microeconomics appear in indifference curve analysis, including individual choice, marginality theory, income substitution effects, and subjective theory of value. So it is very important in indifference curve. So this analysis of indifference curve emphasizes marginal rate of substitution and opportunity cost. So all other economic variables are possible. Complications are treated as stable or ignored unless placed on the indifference graph. So, like most economic textbooks build upon indifference curves to introduce the optimal choice of goods for any consumer based on that consumer's income, right? And classic analysis suggests that the optimal consumption bundle takes place at a point where the consumer's indifference curve is tangent with the budget constraint. So this slope of the indifference curve is known as MRS. So this MRS is the rate at which the consumer is willing to give up one good for another. That is marginal rate of substitution. What I mean by MRS. So if the consumer values apples, for example, like the consumer will be slower to give them for oranges. Understood? And the slope will reflect this rate of substitution. So if it is X and Y, it is apple and orange. Think about that. There are also criticisms of this law as other laws, some complications. Like few economists have said that indifference curves, like many aspects of contemporary economics, have been criticized for oversimplifying or making unrealistic assumptions about human behavior. It's saying that the assumptions made are very unrealistic. One noteworthy criticism is that indifference is conceptually incompatible with economic actions, it says. And every action necessarily demonstrates preference, not indifference. Otherwise, no action would take place, it says. So it is criticized on this ground. And of course, other critics note that it is theoretically possible to have concave indifference curve or even circular curves that are either convex or concave to the origin at various points. So consumer preference might also change because between two different points in time, rendering specific curves practically useless. So on this basis, it is criticized. This law is criticized. So students, in this particular video, let's recollect what we have studied. We have studied about utility, we've studied about marginal utility, total utility, law of diminishing marginal utility, and indifference curve. Look, these concepts are very important to understand further videos. Look, economics, the concepts are connected. These words will be repeating again in future videos. So you should always watch the previous videos, right, before going on for any new video coming in, right? So I hope you've understood today's topic. If not, watch video once, twice, thrice, and you can also ask me questions if still you are not getting what is there in the video anytime, right? So you have even my number with you. You can WhatsApp me, or you can also put in the chat box in the YouTube. Go through the video, understand the concept. Okay, see you in the next video, students. Thank you.